first movie surrounds two friends who end up having no mouths on their faces for the strangest of reasons. The movie opens with two women, Sarah and Putri, working late at the office. For a short while, the two work in silence, and then suddenly, Putri throws a paper ball at Sarah to get her attention. The two women engage in friendly conversation about K-drama, work, and their plans for the evening. Putri tells Sarah that, although she is not done with her work, she is ready to leave the office and will finish up the proposal she is working on from the comfort of her home. Eventually, the two women agree to head home together, but before they are able to do so, they are approached by their boss, Benny. After exchanging pleasantries, Benny tells Putri that she would have to work overnight because he needs her help completing a campaign that is due early the next day. In response to this, Putri politely tells Benny that she is currently working on something urgent that is also due the next day. In a bid to proffer a solution and get in her boss's good graces, Sarah offers to stay behind and help Benny complete the campaign. However, Benny suggests something else. In the end, it is agreed that Sarah will take over the proposal Putri had been working on and finish it up at home, while Putri stays behind to help Benny. This agreement upsets Putri because she had been looking forward to going home, but she grudgingly copies the proposal into a flash drive and hands it to Sarah. When all is settled, Putri heads out to have dinner first, while Sarah packs up and leaves. On the way home, Sarah realizes that she left the flash drive Putri gave her on her desk. Since the proposal is due early the next day, Sarah has no choice but to return to the office to retrieve the flash drive. By the time Sarah re-enters the office building, Putri has joined Benny in his office and is already working on the campaign. As Sarah walks down the hall, she hears Benny offer Putri a position as a junior manager in the company, and this causes her to stop dead in her tracks. The news of a possible promotion excites Putri, but her joy is cut short when Benny approaches her and tells her there is a condition attached. The condition is that, to get promoted, Putri would have to accompany Benny home and spend the night with him. Unable to comply with Benny's request, Putri excuses herself and runs out of the office. To avoid being seen, Sarah hides herself while watching the scene unfold. The next day, everything appears to be normal at the office. Everyone is at their workstation, carrying out their duties, all except Putri, who is nowhere to be found. When the clock shows that it is past 10 and there is still no sign of Putri, Sarah puts a call through to her. At around the third ring, Putri enters their shared cubicle and acts like everything is normal, claiming she is late because she overslept. Moments later, Sarah is terrified to find that Putri's lips are not visible on her face. Sarah attempts to explain this to Putri and the other workers present, but no one else appears to see anything out of the ordinary. Choosing to shift her focus, Sarah pulls Putri aside to discuss the events from the night before. During the conversation, Sarah encourages Putri to speak up about the sexual harassment she suffered at the hands of Benny, but Putri vehemently refuses and walks away, confirming that she would rather stay silent. Later, an overly ambitious Sarah decides to take matters into her own hands by confronting Benny herself. In Benny's office, Sarah makes it clear to her boss that she intends to blackmail him. She tells him that the only way he can keep her quiet is to promote her to the role of a junior manager. At first, Benny plays along, but he later confronts Sarah with the harsh reality. He tells her that she has no proof and that he has the justice system in his pocket. He also points out that he has the upper hand and can even fire her if he wants. Faced with the harsh realization that she is powerless, Sarah leaves Benny's office. When she returns to her desk, we see that Sarah, just like Putri, has no lips on her face, indicating that she has also been silenced. At the end of the film, the two women share a knowing look. In the second movie, the year is 2003, and the China is being ravaged by a strange infection that has an incredibly high mortality rate. The Chinese government is not aware of the existence of the strain pathogen. Instead, they think it is regular pneumonia. The movie opens with a female patient who dies in the operating theater and is wheeled out immediately. In the next scene, Lee, a zealous doctor, meets with his mentor and the director of the hospital where he works, Dr. Su. Lee says he lost 3 patients that week, and he suspects they were not suffering from regular pneumonia as the test results claim. Dr. Su brushes aside Lee's suspicion, saying that losses are inevitable in the medical profession. Later that day, Yi, another doctor at the hospital, who looks up to Lee, gives him a few words of encouragement and advises him to go home. Not satisfied with the answers he had gotten, Lee sneaks into the hospital at night to investigate. While snooping around, Lee discovers that the death records of certain patients have been ripped. He also learns that Dr. Su is hiding the actual number of victims who have died as a result of this strange infection. Back at home, Lee watches a televised interview featuring the Minister of Health and Dr. Gong, a specialist in epidemics. During the interview, the two highly placed officials assure the public that the infection is under control, maintaining that there is nothing to worry about. The next day, Lee confronts Su about covering up the death toll, and Su tries to justify his actions, stating that he and the hospital would come under fire if he did not. When his attempts to reason with Lee fail, Su suspends Lee on the spot. On the way home, Lee calls his trusted subordinate Yi and demands for a blood sample from a patient and a key to the hospital's lab. In response to this, Yi says he cannot grant Lee's request because the hospital has been quarantined, meaning no one can leave and only infected patients are allowed in. At home, Lee is visibly troubled to the point that he barely pays attention to the words of his wife, who tries to inform him of the nationwide panic that the infection has brought on. That night, Lee hatches a plan to help him gain entrance to the hospital. First, he takes a cold bath, fully clothed, and then proceeds to take a walk out in the cold. As a result, he catches a fever. Next, Lee disguises himself and uses his fever symptoms, which are pretty similar to the symptoms of the infection, as a way to get admitted into the hospital. Having gained entrance, Lee seeks out Yi. With Yi's help, Lee launches a full-blown investigation. First, he draws blood from an infected patient, then locks himself away in the lab to test and study the sample. In the other part of the hospital, things are getting out of hand. The infection continues to claim lives, and even medical practitioners have begun to get infected. Alarmed by the state of things, Yi tells Su about Lee's research and brings him to the lab. When the two come face to face, Lee tells Su that the report from the Ministry of Health is false. He reveals that the infection-causing pathogen is an entirely new virus. Taken aback, Su asks Lee if he has any solution in mind, and Lee responds that he intends to use glucocorticoid as a treatment. Su counters this idea by pointing out that glucocorticoids would have adverse side effects on the patients, but Lee turns a deaf ear. Su tries to reason with Lee, but Lee remains adamant, claiming that there is no other way. The conversation eventually comes to an end with Su announcing that while Lee can go ahead to do whatever he wants, none of the patients at his hospital would use the glucocorticoid treatment. In the next scene, Lee returns home for the first time in a week and is confronted by his angry wife. He explains the situation to her and tells her he is traveling to Beijing to inform the necessary authorities. This leads to an argument between the couple, but Lee is determined to do what is right. At the hospital, Su busies himself with finding an alternative treatment method. Eventually, he settles for serum therapy and stands by his decision not to use glucocorticoid. True to his word, Lee travels to Beijing and manages to get an audience with Dr. Gong, the national specialist in epidemics, just before a press conference. Lee shares his findings with Gong and suggests that the glucocorticoid treatment be used in extreme cases. Upon returning home, Lee learns that his wife has been infected and is receiving treatment in Dr. Su's hospital. At the hospital, Lee demands that his wife be treated with glucocorticoid, but Su stands his ground and opts to use serum therapy. The serum therapy works, and Lee's wife makes a full recovery. When everything dies down and the hospital management learns that Dr. Su had been covering up the death toll, he gets fired and Lee is appointed as the new director. The movie ends with Lee having dinner with his family while reading a news report on the adverse effects glucocorticoid treatment had on several patients. A conversation ensues between the family of three when Lee's son declares that some people at his school are accusing Lee of poisoning victims with glucocorticoid. Lee's wife defends him by calling him a hero, but Lee himself speaks up, saying he's nothing more than an ordinary doctor. For the third story, make sure to watch until the end for a huge plot twist. Chorogi opens with a woman, Ji Young, and a little girl, Su Bin, hanging out at a park. It is apparent that the two are mother and daughter because Ji Young has a necklace that says so. For a time, the pair look over an animal encyclopedia together, and then Su Bin goes off to play on the rides. While watching her daughter from the park bench, Ji Young receives a call from her husband, who says he will be home soon. Moments later, a man arrives at the park and takes a seat on a nearby bench. He and Ji Young exchange looks, and she appears to be uncomfortable. The man pulls out his phone and takes pictures of Su Bin. Then he switches seats to sit beside Ji Young. Ji Young tries to put space between them, but the man closes the gap. Now more uncomfortable than before, Ji Young goes back to reading the animal encyclopedia. When she turns to the page with a pig, the man beside her begins to snort. Out of nowhere, the man offers Ji Young a popsicle, and when she turns him down, he has it for himself. Unfazed by Ji Young's visible discomfort, the man approaches Su Bin and offers her a popsicle, which she accepts happily. This is the final straw for Ji Young. She quickly grabs her daughter and heads straight home, leaving behind her cell phone and encyclopedia. Still feeling unsafe, Ji Young turns on the security camera at her house. Later that evening, the security camera shows the man from the park approaching, and moments later, he rings the doorbell. Subin races towards the door, assuming that her father has returned, but before she can undo the lock, Ji-young stops her. Now in panic mode, Ji-young takes Subin to a room and asks her to stay there until she is asked to come out. Ji-young approaches the camera again, and this time the man is holding up her phone. Ji-young asks him to leave the phone by the door and go. She claims that she has called the police and her husband will soon return. In response to this, the man says he only came to give her ice cream and asks to use the toilet, but Ji-young turns him down. Over the next couple of minutes, the man tries various techniques to get into the house, and Ji-young is frightened to the point that she starts to hallucinate. To Ji-young's surprise, the man pulls out a bunch of keys and starts attempting to open the door. While the commotion unfolds upstairs, a well-dressed man returns to the apartment building. He makes his way up the stairs, and when he sees the other man attempting to open the apartment door, he stares wide-eyed for a few seconds, then makes his way to a nearby apartment. When the man from the park is finally able to unlock the door, Ji-young is overcome by fear, and she arms herself with her bottle. Unbothered by Ji-young's state, the man takes a seat and calmly addresses her by her name, but she harshly tells him to leave, claiming that her husband will be home soon. Suddenly, Subin emerges from the room she was in, and to Ji-young's dismay, she goes to the man and embraces him. Unable to bear the thought of her daughter getting hurt, Ji-young attacks the man. Halfway through the attack, a terrified Subin shouts at her mother to stop hurting her dad. These words make Ji-young stop dead in her tracks, and a montage of clips proves that the man is indeed Ji-young's husband and Subin's dad. From the other side of Ji-young's necklace, which is actually a medical alert necklace, we learn that she has Alzheimer's disease, a progressive disease that destroys memory and other important mental functions. Suddenly, Ji-young collapses, and when she wakes up, her husband and daughter are by her bedside. The short film comes to a close when Ji-young asks Subin who she is, indicating that her disease has worsened. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching!